me? Can you hear me okay? My name is Patty Blum, and I have the good fortune to be introducing Marc Vanderhout. That declared sanctuary too. And that was an homage to this man here, Oscar Romero, now a saint.
Marc, can you do anything about the volume?
The Sanctuary Covenant was really the umbrella for those 6 organizations, of 6 churches. And then the East Bay Sanctuary now is this, and it's just amazing for me. Who was there back then to see all of you, and to see the staff, and to see all these young people. It's really amazing. I'm going to take you to a time that is really pretty long ago. In fact, Marc and I met in 1978, and we were part of a small but intrepid group of activist lawyers in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we all were highly motivated by the experiences we had when we were coming up, so to speak, because the war in Vietnam was going on, and we were all anti-war activists. And when we came to the Bay Area, all of us in different ways, we looked to the National Lawyers Guild, which was is a very progressive organization of lawyers. We got a little group together, I think a few of you may be here, and we were very idealistic because we really wanted to change things in immigration law, policy, and practice. And it was a time in which there was no separate asylum office. If you were helping a client apply for asylum, they were seeing an immigration officer who might be doing asylum today, and then tomorrow he would be doing a visa petition, and the next day maybe he was sent out to arrest him. And so there were so many things that we take for granted now that are being attacked that didn't actually even exist when we started. And so we were really dedicated to trying out new legal strategies, challenging the government as it needs to be challenged now, and fighting for the constitutional rights of all immigrants. And we created a network a small network that's grown exponentially of like-minded people, especially via the National Lawyers Guild. And Marc was always at the forefront of all of these activities. And I can't even begin to tell you how many positions he had in the National Lawyers Guild because it would take like an hour. But he also was the president of the National Lawyers Guild at the time. In those early days, Marc was motivated very much politically because of the U.S.'s role in backing the military dictatorships in Central America. This meant he was bringing lawsuits to try to stop the funding by the United States, which was enabling the Salvadoran military dictatorship in particular, and getting very involved, very centrally involved with the sanctuary movement and supporting the sanctuary movement. In fact, he had gone to Arizona to meet with one of the leading proponents of sanctuary, Reverend John Fife, with a group from the Center for Constitutional Rights, an organization that Marc has worked with throughout his career, to talk about the possibilities and risks of sanctuary. And very soon thereafter, there was the group here in Berkeley and the group in Arizona that declared sanctuary. I'm going to just focus a little bit on some of these early day actions and activities that Marc was engaged in. He had his own law office in the Mission, and he had a large docket of Central American refugees, even as their claims were being systematically denied. At that point in time, only less than 3% of Salvadorans could get asylum and less than 1% of Guatemalans. We wanted to push back on this, and so Mark and I cooked up a plan to combine two of our cases to test the limits of what was then the very new Refugee Act of 1980. Mark somehow, and I still don't really understand it, even reflecting back on it, convinced the immigration lawyer to allow these two cases to go together and to give us a month in the immigration court to put on our trial. And that trial was really about what was going on, truly what the truth was about El Salvador. And we were aided so much by so many priests, ministers, nuns, and lay workers who came and testified during that month-long period about what they had seen when they had gone down to El Salvador and worked among the people. And you know, look, we lost that case. We even lost it at the Ninth Circuit, but it was one of the cases that galvanized a whole movement among immigration lawyers to really spend a lot of time and creative energy trying to push. What did the Refugee Act mean? What did the definition of a refugee mean? How could we push it further? And I will say, you know, Mark and I were there at the Ninth Circuit when he and I argued the case, and that was the beginning for Mark of a history of going on to argue over 30 cases in the Circuit Courts of Appeal. When 19 sanctuary workers in Arizona were indicted, Mark was not working directly on the criminal case, but he and others came up with the idea of trying to stop the trials. And that case, which was called American Baptist Churches versus Thornburg, which some of you know or have heard as the ABC case, unfortunately, the trials did go further, and the arguments that were made to stop the trials were not successful. But what remained was something that Mark had really pushed to have happen, which was to include a claim about the systematic discrimination against Salvadoran and Guatemalan refugees. Now, that case, I'll just going to tell one anecdote from that case. I will never forget when our team was asked to meet with the General Counsel of the Immigration and Naturalization Service. We met in the posh, you know, conference room of the law firm that was putting in pro bono hours on the ABC case. At that first encounter, the General Counsel told us that the government wanted to settle the case. We had heard that might be possible, but it wasn't the same as sitting in the room and finding out that this case could be settled. This was a time, like it is now, in which there weren't settlements. The government did not settle cases. And we were just totally stunned, you know, to really hear that. And so we walked out into another conference room. And we're all just kind of quiet and standing around and kind of not knowing what to do with ourselves until Mark yells, "What the hell? We won!" But the thing was that conference room wasn't that far from the conference room where the General Counsel was. So none of us could join in and start yelling and screaming. So in silence, we're just hugging each other and jumping up and down and then trying to like get ourselves in order to go back in and tell the General Counsel, yes, we want to negotiate. And that negotiation was not easy. It was really, really difficult. And I just want to point out some of the things that Mark did. It was a class action case. We represented over 250,000 Salvadoran and Guatemalan refugees. And that is a sacred burden to take on. And Marc was always the one to keep our minds on our clients, on this group of people, the humans that were affected by what the US government had done. And also, of course, he pushed us to comb through every word. It was like every single word in every single sentence of every single government proposal had to be looked at and gone over, and were we for it or were we against it? And fundamentally and most importantly, Marc pushed us never to concede anything until we got what we wanted. And I think we did a pretty good job of it, actually, when I go back and read it. I'm skipping over so much of the many, many cases that Marc has done in his career, and I would love to regale you with them or have him regale you with them some other time, just because there is not at all possibly enough time to do that here. I'll just say that while we were working on the American Baptist Churches case, which obviously was a huge case, Marc was working on another case, which was referred to as the LA8 case. And that was the case of 8 Palestinians who the government was seeking to deport using false accusations against them. Marc persisted with this case for 20 years. It was 20 years. It was 20 years, and it ended because of the government's misconduct on so many levels. And it foreshadowed the work that Marc is now doing, and which I will just say 1 or 2 sentences about and let you hear a bit more about it from Marc. I will say that when he took this case, he had kind of aspirations to start retiring. You know, we do have gray hair, and a lot of people we know are retired. And so he was taking steps within his law firm to kind of retire. And then Khalil Mahmoud was arrested. Khalil, many of you know who that is. He is a Columbia University graduate student. He was an expectant father when he was picked up. He is a lawful permanent resident of the US. He's Palestinian, and he is a champion and outspoken about Palestinian causes. He was abducted by ICE. He was sent within 2 days to their wretched lockup in Louisiana. Marc started getting bombarded by everyone who was in any way, shape, or form connected to Khalil, saying, please, 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 will you represent him? And Marc did agree to represent him, which meant that Marc was not retiring and was, as he described it to me, now working 60 to 70 hours a week just on this one case. And that may be more apparent to you because they're in the immigration court, they'll be in the Board of Immigration Appeals, they're in federal court, they're in circuit court. And this case is a test case, and it's going to be a test of wills because Marc Vander Hout is part of it. I have to stop now, Just in closing, I want to say that Marc's docket obviously was always full. He was known especially for his expertise and his successes in federal court. He was the litigator everyone wanted. But as a human being, Marc is truly a gem. He's so funny. Everybody knows his laugh is completely unique. Never heard a laugh like Marc's. He's brilliant, he's loyal, he's compassionate, and he is the best colleague a gal could ever have. So it is my distinct honor to ask Marc to join me on the podium to receive the 2025 Sanctuary Litigator Award.
Wow. Thank you all. Para los que no hablan inglés, lo siento mucho que no puedo hablar en quiché o quechical o los otros idiomas de los de las personas MAM, y también no tengo tiempo de hablar en español también. Entonces, ojalá que pueda entender un poquito que lo estoy diciendo y voy a hablar solamente en inglés. Thank you all, and thank you, Patty, for those really incredible remarks. And a little overstatement, but appreciated. And as Patty said, we started out as baby attorneys. We didn't know a thing. There was a couple lawyers group had like 2 years experience on us. We would meet regularly, and we had a lot of chutzpah. And we knew how to fight the good fight, and that's what we did. So thank you, Patty, for those wonderful remarks. And in the thank yous, I have to, of course, start with my amazing wife, Jody Lewitter. And our wonderful daughter, Jackie. They have both been a source of strength and counsel to me over the years, in putting up with my long and somewhat odd hours, as people might know. Thank you both so much. And thank you to my so important community of friends. Many of you are out here today, and my colleagues who are always there for me when the going gets tough, and it has often gotten tough. So thank you all, and you know who you are. I appreciate it. And of course, my office. It takes a village to do cases like the ones I've had the honor of being involved in over these years. And it would not have been possible to do any of these mostly pro bono cases without the support of the amazing people in my office, doing the day-to-day important work with keeping the office afloat. I'm gonna put some of these away since they're not mine. And I can then read mine. And a particular thank you, shout outs to my former partner of almost 30 years before her retirement, Christine Bagaliano, who's here somewhere. Zach Nightingale, my great partner, who is not here today. And my comrade and partner in arms, Johnny Sinotis, who has been with me in all these high-profile cases over the last several years. It is only together, that we were able to be a part of suing the administration for its role in the genocide in Gaza, to obtain a nationwide injunction against the Trump administration's illegal cancellations and revocations of student visas, which we were successful in. Or taking on the amazing case, the case of the amazing, I will say, Mahmoud Khalil that Patty mentioned. And I have to say that that's with many other organizations, Center for Constitutional Rights, ACLU, NYU Law School, and many others. And that's the way I've done cases in all these years. almost never a case alone, always co-counseling. And we have a community of amazing lawyers throughout the country taking on the political cases, and it's been just such an honor to be able to work with them over the years. In ABC case, they were involved. In the LA8 case, they were involved. I don't do anything alone. And so thank you, Johnny, and all the other co-counsel who are here today. And let me say, of course, a huge congratulations to the other honorees. Francisco, whose wonderful, wonderful, wonderful political music I have enjoyed for years, so thank you for that. And all of you amazing women representing the mom community and others. I'm just been learning about your work. So wonderful to have met you today, and thank you for everything you are doing for that community. It is very special. And of course, the incredible staff and board here at EBSC for everything you do for the refugee community and others. Thank you so much. It is really special to me to be honored by EBSC, for as Patty mentioned, we go way, way, way back. Together in the early 80s, in the young male case, that's what we called it, to try to establish what is a social group in immigration law that Patty talked about. And being present in 1982, on March 24th, the anniversary of Oscar Romero's assassination, the second anniversary, for the announcement of declaring public sanctuary, and continuing with EBSC and others who were plaintiffs in the ABC case that Patty talked about. It is amazing, really, really amazing, to see how this organization has developed and continues to be the incredible force it is today. So thank you very much, EBSC. And all of their and our work is so important today. Speaking of only the immigration field, and we all know the horrors that this administration is doing well beyond the immigration field. We are seeing an attack on immigrants unprecedented in this country's history. The attacks on alleged immigrant anarchists in the early 1900s, or on alleged communists in the 1950s, quite honestly, do not hold a candle to what is happening before our eyes under the Trump administration, while the Republican-controlled Congress willingly goes along. From the virtual, complete elimination of refugee admissions and asylum seekers to this country, to the attempts to deport with Supreme Court acquiescence refugees and others to anywhere in the world, no matter what may happen to them when they arrive there. From the essentially complete halt to the granting of almost any visas to any Palestinian, to the well-publicized attacks that Patty talked about on the First Amendment, starting with, and let me emphasize, this is only starting with, trying to deport Mahmoud, Mohsen Madawi, Rumessa Ozturk, and the others for solely speaking out on behalf of Palestinian rights and against the massacres that have been going on in Gaza. From the attacks on due process in the immigration court system by placing, in combination with the high quotas that ICE officers are required to meet in arrests. The absurd case completion requirements for immigration judges, and the not subtle, no way subtle, marching orders to immigration judges to adjudicate cases in ways favorable to government prosecutors. And to the abrupt firing that was mentioned before of immigration judges who believe in due process and following the law. Now, I want to take a minute. We have several of these judges here today, and I want to give a shout out to them. So, and I think they're all here. Isla Dice, Chloe Dillon, Shearer Levine, Kira Lillian, and Elizabeth Young. Please stand and let us show our love to them. Thank you all so much for what you've been doing and for making this public and for standing up for due process in the immigration courts. Thank you so, so much. We are seeing an attack on immigration and immigrants in this country greater than any time before. The Congress, the Supreme Court, and large parts of the media, university, and private employers are acquiescing or enabling what is going on by our government. We must stand in EBSC's proud tradition and stand up for immigrants and other vulnerable populations. We must fight. We must not be silenced. Those of us who are lawyers must continue to sue and fight back any way we can in support of those who are being targeted by this administration, which is essentially all people not born in this country, and even, as we know, some who have been. We can still win many individual cases in immigration court and in the federal courts. And that is so important to the people on whose behalf we are fighting. And on challenges to government policies on a larger scale, the federal courts, by and large, have been important in halting, at least temporarily, the unconstitutional and otherwise unlawful actions of Stephen Miller and his cronies. But we have seen the rulings of the Supreme Court and its shadow docket, and we know that this right-wing court has an agenda. And only with a few exceptions, and there will be a few, will allow this administration to literally get away with murder. But lawyers can only take it so far. People must follow the examples of the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, the anti-war movement of the 60s and 70s, the gay rights movement of the 70s and 80s, and other similar movements, and be out there in the streets, protesting, doing organizing on the local, state, and national level, make their voices heard and our bodies seen. We must do the hard work of going and speaking in our churches, our synagogues, our mosques, in our union halls, in our local community groups, and more. We must out-organize the right. We don't have years. The threat of an autocracy is real and is happening right now. This is not meant to cause despair, rather to encourage action. I challenge all of us to get involved. We must speak out and stand up. We must be seen and we must be heard. La lucha continua. Thank you very much. See you in the streets.